Okay, folks, welcome back. Another instructional video ahead of us here today. So, this video is going to start the process of me trying to replace some of the videos that were already on the menswear page, for those of you who are familiar with those, that were unfortunately lost due to some sort of Facebook update, I guess. I don't know if they did something with copyright law or whatever happened there. Anyway, a lot of you have been asking me about the construction videos that were on the menswear page that we had started a series of over the COVID holiday, let's call it that. And Facebook did some sort of update, and part of that update involved the removal of videos that had been uploaded, in particular live videos, and unfortunately a lot of the ones we did were live videos at the time. I think it had something to do with concerns over violations of copyright law or something to that effect. Don't quote me on it. I haven't researched it all that much. I kind of just did a quick search with Uncle Google to find out what was going on when you guys started asking where those went. So those are all gone, unfortunately. So as promised here on the new YouTube channel, where things should live forever, hopefully, I'm going to start replacing those. So today we're going to start by redoing the video on how to attach pocket flaps. We will give a demonstration of one pocket bag to go with this. There will be 3 different ways of attaching a pocket flap included in this video. It's likely to be a little bit of a long video. I'm not savvy enough on YouTube to know how to put those little timestamp things in where you can jump around and get the information you want. And frankly, I'm not likely to figure that out. The YouTube channel is a way for me to get information to you, but it's not something I intend to devote an awful lot of time to understand exactly how it works. So we're just gonna make a video, and if you want to get to the parts you want to get to, you're gonna have to get comfortable with the fast forward reverse button, and that's just kind of the way it is. So pocket flaps. So we're going to talk about the actual sort of flapped pockets today. We will replace the video on welt pockets at a later date. Unlike the original video, I'm not going to show you how to interface and line this. That will probably come up in a future video when we talk about construction techniques. So for the purpose of today's video, I'm just going to be using some scrap pieces that are cut roughly into the shape of a pocket flap. They're not to any scale. I just kind of, free-handed these things and cut them out real quick before the video. So don't necessarily use the flap I have here as a reference for really anything. We just wanted to give you a shape that would roughly give you the idea of what we're talking about. So for the purposes of today's video, we're going to assume that you have already interfaced and lined the pocket flap. That should be done before you attach it to the coat. So this video will be a little bit out of the normal order of operations, as it were, but I think it's important enough of a technique or series of techniques, as we're doing today, to be its own standalone video. So we're just going to talk about attaching these to the coat body or waistcoat body, or I suppose breeches body if you're doing a really early pair of breeches. But the assumption would be you already have these interfaced and lined, if that's what you intended to do with them. Okay, so there will be 3 methods shown today on how to actually attach these things, and 1 demonstration on a pocket bag being set in. So let's jump into it. This will actually be shown later, so let me pull out the sample piece that we intend to use right now. So we're going to put two different techniques on one piece of cloth here. The first technique will be probably what is the easiest. It involves you taking the seam allowance of the top of the pocket flap and pressing it under, like I have shown here. This is pretty easy because it doesn't involve any sort of weird manipulation of this curve. Now, pockets don't always have this curve, right? That should be noticed, this top curve. Pocket flaps don't always have these. I've included it in this video because it's what confuses people a lot when they have to attach them, right? This curve. If it were just straight across the top, all of what I'm going to show you today is really easy and frankly not worth the video. So that's why we put the curve in here. So the technique number one, anyway, will involve you taking the seam allowance, which you can see is about 1/4 of an inch or so. Again, something I just kind of eyeballed for the video. And you press it under, okay? So we're going to start off with the top flap already being pressed under. Now, what we have beneath here are these sort of boxes that have been drawn out. So this line across here, across the top, this is going to be our coat waist line. So for those of you who have watched the drafting videos, that's what this line is here. This is the coat waist line, okay? Orientation for the garment. This would be the top of the garment going up this way, and this would be the front edge, okay? So our vent would be back here somewhere, and your armhole and neckline are going to be up this direction, and the bottom of the coat is going to be down here. So that's our orientation. So we have our coat waistline here. Now the two hashes that have been drawn on here indicate the flanks of the pocket itself, where it should sit on the body, okay? Now, one thing that should be discussed is like, where is this placement on a body? And it's really going to depend on, you know, what it is you're making. I highly recommend you reference, you know, original garments or original flats. A flat is a drawing of a garment that's been deconstructed, at least for the drawing, so all the pieces sit flat. I would reference the distance from the front edge to the front of the pocket flap. I would not reference the distance from the vent to the back of the pocket flap. Now, this may be wrong, but this is the way I reference it. 18th century people tend to be a lot smaller than most people who are recreating these garments today. And where this pocket flap sits sort of in relation to the entire body kind of matters, because it has a stylistic mattering, right? Sometimes placement looks nice to the eye and sometimes it looks bad to the eye, but also has a functional placement, right? Coat pockets tend to sit a little further back. Waistcoat pockets tend to sit a little further to the front. And if you consider when you're wearing those garments, and if you want to right now just sort of drop your hands down and think about how you would dig into those pockets, that sort of makes sense. So if you're somebody who has, let's say, like a 40-inch waist, and you set it back on the back end from the vent to the back pocket is the same as somebody with like a 28-inch waist, historically, you're probably going to find it's way off on the front edge if you're going to use an original pocket flap size. And I suppose some of that could be debated as well, right? Because pocket flaps, to a certain extent, should sort of be proportional to the body that they're on. You know, I don't think we should necessarily pigeonhole ourselves into, oh, this is an original pocket flap, I've copied it perfectly, I'm going to put that on my garment. The shape should be copied, absolutely, but probably also the proportionality to the entire body should be copied, because it did have a certain proportionality originally based on the measurements of the person who wore it 250 plus years ago. So just kind of keep that in mind, but we're not talking about drafting pocket flaps today, so we're not going to delve any further into that. So let's talk about how do we put this on the coat body. So the top corners of this pocket flap, right? These 2 points are what should sit on the coat waist line, in the markings that you've marked them in. So go ahead and set that in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to base the pocket flap into place. I'm sure you're seeing me do something odd right now. So let's talk about it briefly. If you've ever getting ready to sew and you realize your fingers are a little slick, you just go ahead and rub them on your beeswax, and It'll make your fingers a little bit stickier and make it easier for you to grab your needle as you work. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to base this. We're going to base this pocket flap into place. Okay, this is going to be kind of a quick, dirty thing. Don't need to necessarily take a lot of time with it. All we want it to do is be where we want it to be, and not shift around a lot. Right? That's all we want. This is going to be easier at the small scale than it would be in live scale. But that's okay. When you're basting, you don't actually always want to be putting shape into cloth. So you need to pay attention, depending on the kind of basting you're doing. When you pull these threads taut, you want to make sure that you're not bunching up things back here or pulling this front edge away from where you intend it to be sitting. So make sure it's sitting flat whenever you do this, if that's what your intention is, for it to be flat. Sometimes we do basting to hold shape in. This is not necessarily one of those times. I say necessarily for a reason, and we're going to talk about that here in a moment. So there it is. The pocket flap has been sort of basted into place, roughly, so it doesn't shift around on us, okay? Now, let's talk about when I said not necessarily putting shape in with a pocket flap. So what I'm grabbing here is, this thing's called a tailor's ham. It's a way that you press things into curve. A pocket flap is worn on a garment, on the side of the body, right? So it will actually sit something like this on the body. It will not be sitting flat. It will be sitting in a curved way. So when you baste a pocket flap on, go ahead and grab a ham or something similar to a ham if you don't own one, and check it. Make sure it's not sitting weird when you put it into a curve. It very well may end up sitting odd. It could actually go from straight to curved and end up being really tight, and then the pocket flap will want to pick up, or you'll get some puckering in here or something odd. So just check it. And if that's happening to you, then what my recommendation would be is to baste it on top of the ham, so it's being put on in the curve. And if you do that, in which case then you are basting sort of a shape into the garment. It's not often a problem I find with these things, but it's something worth checking. It's not the kind of thing you want to find out when you get a garment entirely finished, and then you go to wear it, and then you find out like, oh man, that's not ideal. So, all right, we got it basted in. So we're going to go ahead and actually attach this. So this is a real simple construction. Because we pressed the seam allowance under on the top, the only thing we have to do now is whip stitch the top edge. We're going to do a nice fine whip stitch right along the whole top edge here, and I'm going to use some awesome red thread here so you can kind of see it against the green. So we're going to start on the back edge of the pocket, right? We're going to come up and into the pocket, up in the top corner, okay? And our thread has been knotted on the back side. And then to make this stitch, we are going to come into the body cloth on the same plane as we came out with the top. And we're going to catch just a little bit, if you can see that, just a little bit of the top pocket, okay? And then pull it through. Like so. And again, we're going to put the needle in right where the thread came out. not forward of it, right where it came out, and catch just a little bit of the top of the pocket. And pull it through. And one more time, needle in right where the thread came out on the coat body, catching just a little bit of the pocket flap. And we're going to do this all the way across the top. Now, if you do this with the thread that actually matches, the idea would be that you don't really see the thread at all. The goal of this is not for you to show off your hand-sewed garment. The goal of this is to attach a pocket flap in a nice, neat way. The idea of showing off you hand-sewed something is kind of a modern idea that's done by people who are only hand-sewing something because they want to charge you more for the pleasure of it having been hand-sewn. Anybody who hand-sews stuff just because it's either A, the construction technique that just makes sense, or B, in our case, because it's the only construction technique that you have, you don't show off that you hand-sewed something. There's no benefit to that. In the case of something like this, a pocket flap that's going to be worn on the outside of a garment and contacted quite a bit, either by you or because you bump into things and rub up against stuff. Actually, the less of this thread that shows, the better, because then it's more protected. So this is all we're doing. We are just whip stitching across the top of this. Catching the needle right where the thread had disappeared, or reappeared, I should say. And the reason we do that is when the thread gets pulled taut, because it doesn't have any forward motion, the distance is shorter between here, and it's more apt to be hidden. You can kind of see, I mean, we're using this red thread, and you really can't tell all that much, right? That the thread doesn't match, because we're doing a decent job of hiding it, which is, again, what we want. Now, another thing I'm doing, and I don't know if this really shows up in the video or not, is when I get ready to take a stitch, when I do the bending of the cloth, I'm actually holding the back cloth sort of steady with my pointer finger, and I'm rotating the thumb a bit to the front. And what that does is it offsets the tendency of the top moving back over time as we stitch, and then this point ending up not where we marked it. It's something to keep out for. If you don't do something like that, by the time you get done, and again, this is a very short pocket, right, because it's a little tiny fake thing. By the time you get done with a live size pocket that may be 8 or 9 inches long, you can end up, you know, 1/8 of an inch or more off when you get done, which is not ideal. So what I do is, again, as I get ready to take the stitch, I put the needle in, and then I kind of clamp the cloth between my thumb and my pointer finger, and I rotate the top cloth forward just slightly. I just kind of rotate the thumb a bit, and it pulls that top cloth a little bit taut. And it helps to offset some of that. Another thing that really helps offset that is doing more basting than we just did here. When I do these pockets at full scale, I may do 2 or 3 rows of basting along here, just to really make sure that stuff does not move. So something to consider, something you just play with. The material working with makes a difference as well. So just little things to play with and be aware of. And you have to try it out for yourself. Okay, so when we get to the end, last stitch, thread in, and knot on the back side. Right, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, so there we go. We've got the pocket attached on the front there. So at this point, we can go ahead and take our basting thread out, right? Because we don't need it anymore. So let's go ahead and take that out. And so you can see a little bit of this puckering that happened here, right? Because we put this curve in, and we were doing that little move with our thumb. But you'll notice again, once we put it on the ham, that kind of makes sense. This ham also makes more sense for a full-size pocket rather than this little thing. I mean, honestly, probably the side of the ham would be more in I guess scale to what we would be doing. But so that's that. So now we're going to press the pocket, and we're going to use the ham for this because again, it gets worn on the curve. So we're going to take our iron, and we're going to anchor the cloth down real quick, and we're going to pull the pocket. You see how I'm putting tension on the pocket flap? Put some tension on the pocket flap, and then go ahead and press this down that way, right? Putting tension on the pocket flap, and give her a press. If you're using a steam iron like I am, use the steam to soften the fabric, okay? So you use the steam really without any pressure, and then push down with the iron whenever the steam's off. And then the pressure will actually do the work. And then you can use a clapper like I'm using here also. A clapper is a piece of hardwood that helps suck some of the moisture from the steam out of the fabric and helps hold the heat without scorching it. But the steam is used just to loosen the fibers up so that we can then use the pressure and the heat from the iron and the clapper holding it in to permanently set those fibers in a new direction. So there we go. That would be the easiest way of attaching a pocket flap. You just sort of whip stitch the top of it on. It's not terribly thick at the transition, but it also has some thickness. So that's a downside of doing this. Places I use this. Enlisted clothing, in particular, if it doesn't involve lacing. We can talk about lacing a pocket flap. That's the third technique, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if the top of the flap isn't laced, for example, this is where I would use that, right? It's easy and it's quick. So things like enlisted clothing, workman's quality clothing, I would also do the same thing. Any clothing that may be turned into something else later. So for example, if you do any pre-Rev War British stuff, the regulations always talk about turning waistcoats turning coats into waistcoats the following year. Doesn't seem like it really happens much, at least during times of conflict. But either way, that's the idea, right? So the construction would have to reflect that idea. So on enlisted coats of that period, sort of the pre-68 warrant, all my coat flaps are like this. So there's no actual hole being cut into the cloth, which will make sense when I show you the next technique. And I believe you know, the pockets are actually set into the lining. So when you want to turn a coat body into a waistcoat body, you don't have a hole cut into it. So that's where I would use this pocket flap. The other place I may use this technique is on something that is likely to fray a lot. So we could be talking about, or not necessarily talking about, but we could be talking about certain knits or silks, very fine linen possibly, or cotton, that kind of thing. If I think cutting a hole into this to attach this just makes a weak point that can't really otherwise be justified, I'll use this technique. So the next technique, this is something that you are going to find on finer quality garments, particularly those that are made of wool. So you can think officers' clothing, or you know, just wealthier gentlemen in general. So this involves backstitching the pocket flap on and folding it under, and then cutting out the excess so that when we press this, there is no thickness at the transition at all. This could also be done without cutting it open and pressing it in such a way, and then stitching it down in such a way that you don't really have that. But we're not going to do that in today's video. So you can see I've got some seam allowance on the back side of the pocket flap. Okay, we'll put an X on here so you know this is the wrong side of the pocket flap. Once again, we're going to assume that you already have this interfaced and lined. Okay, so now what do? So we want to back stitch this pocket flap on so that when it's pressed and cut, it doesn't have any thickness at all. So let's turn it back to the front side, and let's go ahead and find out where do we want it to be attached. So it's the same thing as before, right? We want it to be point to point here, right? Now we do need the curve transferred. So what I do is I trace the curve of the top of the pocket flap like so onto the coat body. So now I can see that, right? So now turn our pocket flap backwards and upside down. And we are going to baste this into the coat body. And this becomes a little interesting because this curve that's going the wrong direction of the curve we drew on the coat body, well, they need to match. So this is our sew line and this is our sew line. So we need to match them up. So we start by getting this point set here, and we'll just baste it in, just this outside point. Just get it basted in so it's anchored, okay? Then take this point, and you could do a basting anchoring also, but what I do is I just kind of throw a pin in here for in the meantime, all right? And then what we do is we just start basting this curve into where it should go on the front. Now I do promise you, in real life, with a full-size pocket, this is probably easier to do than this little tiny pocket that we're demonstrating it on, right? So each one of these basting stitches is, you know, it's a certain length or whatever, and proportionally they're way bigger in this smaller pocket than they would be in a full-size pocket. So this is likely to end up being a bit sloppier than it would be at full scale, but it will show you the technique, and the technique is what we're after here. So you just stretch the pocket curve onto the coat body curve, okay, and baste her in. Like so. And that's it. So now we take our red thread and we are going to perform a back stitch all along that sewing line. So just south here of the basting thread, we're going to do a back stitch. Probably want to do a relatively fine back stitch when doing this. I'm going to probably do a little bit of a rush job here just to get us through this part of the video, because you want to learn how to do this, not necessarily just watch me backstitch the whole time, right? So you backstitch across the line, backstitch across the line, all the way down, just following the edge of that chalk line that you had drawn on there. So if you base something like this along the, chalk line has a sort of a thickness, right? So if you based it along the top or the other side of the chalk line, you can then do your permanent stitching on the other flank of the chalk line. And that keeps your basting and your stitching relatively close, but without you permanently stitching your basting in. Now you may notice some weird puckering and stuff here while we're sewing this in. And like before, some of that is because we're sewing a curve onto a piece of cloth. Some of that is because we're sewing it the wrong direction right now. But any of it that's left in there, because this is wool, we can shrink out. Which means that we can, it's sort of the same technique as adding fullness to something that you don't necessarily want the fullness to show later. So you can add it and then shrink it out. And wool has that ability to stretch and shrink, which is pretty cool and absolutely useful at times. So when we're done pressing this, we shouldn't see any of that puckering. And even if the fullness is still there, you won't see it. All right, so we're at the end here. We're going to knot this off. So there we go. We have it back stitched in. All right. So we're going to go ahead and remove our basting threads now, just like before. And press it the right direction. And then we're going to do some cool cutting stuff. Okay, so there's our pocket flap, and then you can see when we move it back down the right direction, you can't see the stitching at all because all the stitching's under here. So we're going to press this first like this, and then we'll talk about cutting it. So we've got some scrap other wool here we're going to use as a pressing pad. So we're going to do this flat for right now, because right now all I'm trying to do is train the pocket flap to kind of lay the right direction and maybe shrink out any of that fullness that's already in there. Not trying to create a final shape yet, just train the flap a little bit. So there we go. So already you can see that we've achieved essentially with this the same thing we've achieved with this, right? There's a little bulk to the transition, and you can tell. So, but the stitching is completely hidden because it's on the inside. So, what do we do about that? So let's open our pocket flap back up. And let's go ahead and take our seam allowance and let's just trace it. Trace it onto the coat body, like so, okay? So we have that traced. And then we're gonna come in like 1/2 inch or so. Now that I'm trying to do this a little bit to scale on here. We'll come in like, what would be, I don't know, something like 1/2 inch, okay? And make a little flank mark. And now we're gonna cut this open along here, okay? So grab a smaller pair of scissors, fold your cloth in half, and let's go and make a little snip. Just enough for you to get the bottom blade of your shears in. And then cut along that hole, or that line, I'm sorry, until you get to those weird little flank markers that you made, okay? Just to get to the flank marker. And that's it. And that flank marker needs to be in further from the edge, okay? And now we're gonna flip it to the back side. And we're gonna open that seam allowance up. And we're gonna give it a press, okay? Something like so. Right? Just like that. And now you may realize when you do that there's a little bit of tension here in these corners, right? Yeah, it's not a problem. Because once we know where the tension is in those corners, we're going to go back to the front and we're going to snip along that little tension line up to, but not through, the stitching that we have for our pocket flap, okay? Just like so, we've relieved that little bit. Should be a little triangle. Again, at full scale, this triangle is a lot more noticeable. And flip back to the back. Get our pressing pad out here. Flip back to the back. Get all that seam allowance open. And give this a good press. A real good press. Okay, so again, steam we use to soften the fabric up, get the fibers ready to move. And then we use pressure from the iron, and then we get the clapper involved. And you just put the clapper on it, and you maintain pressure. Now the clapper is going to hold the heat into the fabric without scorching it, right? Because it's not adding heat, it's just holding heat. But also, you can see how it's darker on this side now than this side. It's going to absorb moisture out of here, which we want. We don't want to keep the moisture in there because that's how shrinking is done. We're not trying to do any shrinking necessarily. So if we flip back to the front again, now you can see our pocket really has no thickness at all to its transition. It's nice and smooth, other than up at the corners. And the corners are going to get tacked down. So that's not really, it's not really a problem. So this I would use on any wool garment that is of higher quality, let's say. Gentleman's quality garment, officer quality stuff that doesn't have any lace involved with the top of the pocket flap. This is what you see and how it's done. And you can see it's a nice clean transition because it's not any thicker now than the coat body, right? It's on an even playing field, on the same plane as the coat body. So that's that. You may notice I didn't remove the chalk before I did the pressing, and I'm pretty much going to be stuck with the chalk now. It will eventually brush out, but you always want to remove chalk before you do any pressing work at all. If there is any wax or anything like that in that chalk, which just could occur naturally, it's going to melt into the cloth, and then it's not going to come out. And you see me beating on it and nothing's happening. Well, if I put a fresh bit of chalk down and I beat it, you can see it wants to disappear just by tapping on it. And it's not happening now to the chalk I press. So don't do that. Remove the chalk before you press. But anyway, okay, so there you go. That's that pocket. That's that pocket covered. Okay, so let's talk about the third way to attach a pocket. Now this will involve regimental clothing and officers' clothing or footman clothing, right? Any kind of livery that would involve some form of lace work. Okay, so you'll see on the top of the pocket flap, this first line I have drawn. This is the seam allowance, and we don't need the seam allowance in this particular case. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut the seam allowance out. All right. Then there's a second line I have drawn there. That second line is where I want the lace to sit on the top of the pocket. So that'll make sense here in a moment. Okay. So, like usual, put the top two corners on our markers for where we want the pocket to sit. Now this time we're not going to baste because we're just going to do a really ugly running stitch up here along the top. Okay. So it's going to look like basting at this scale, but this is just an ugly running stitch that we're going to put in the top. This will not be removed. This is how we are permanently attaching the top of this pocket to the coat body. Okay. It doesn't have to be pretty, just kind of get it done because it's going to be hidden. All right. So just get it on. Maybe want to do a little bit tighter stitching than I'm doing now, but frankly, it doesn't matter. Just get it on. Okay. When you get to the end, you go to knot it off. You can knot it in the top or the bottom. Doesn't matter because this is going to get hidden. Okay. So what is happening here? So we get this sort of quickly thrown on. Now what we're trying to demonstrate is a pocket that is laced. Okay. So the pocket would look, something like this, right? And it's going to have the lace going all the way around it. Okay. Now what you'll notice a lot of times is these pockets have lace that go across the top. This is actually what's really holding the pocket on. So I'm not going to do this because I'm not going to waste this stuff that I have here. But what you're likely to see is that the lace will come up from the edge of the pocket, right? So the lace is on the pocket itself. And then you'll see it make its little bend, its little turn, right? It'll be formed into shape. And then it will straddle the top of the pocket. Can you see that? It'll straddle the top of the pocket like so. So then you're stitching on either side of the lace. So one side of the lace is in the coat body and one side of the lace is on the pocket flap like that. And that actually becomes the permanent bond between the coat body and the pocket. So I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to waste the lace I have here to show you that, but I think you get the idea, right? There'll be a running or a prick stitch going along this edge and along this edge, and then that hides the transition of the coat, of the pocket flap to the coat body, and it also is the primary construction stitch, if it were. This little running stitch you did here is just basically to hold it in place. So that's how that is done. I guess we should mention real quick, it's also sometimes seen where the pocket itself will be laced down the side, down the bottom, and up the other side, and it will not be laced across the top by the same lace that's lacing the pocket flap. You may then find that there's lace that rides next to the pocket flap and sort of outlines the pocket flap, and it runs along like so. Well, that is the lace then that when it runs up the side, will cover the top of the pocket flap. So you'll find that sometimes also. All right, pocket bag. Let's do a pocket bag real quick. It's going to be the same thing for all of these. We'll use this pocket here just because it's off to the side and it's easy for me to work with, rather than when we cut open. But it's no different. So let's go ahead and flip our pocket flap up, okay? And let's make a mark that would represent something like 1/2 inch in on either side, okay? And then we want, let's say, I don't know, 3/4 to an inch maybe down on either side of it, and then a little bit lower, another 1/2 inch or so lower, right? And we're going to draw ourselves this little smiley face, right? You may have seen this little smiley face, right? So this is going to be what we use. And the pocket flap should cover it. Sometimes it's useful to chalk the outline of the pocket flap, right? Just to make sure that it's fully covered when we get done. So again, take your small shears, fold fabric in half, give yourself a little nip so that you can get your bottom shear in, and cut along the moon shape that you just drew, okay, up to the side flanks. Okay. So it should look something like that, right? You got this little moon shape that you cut into it. Now, flip it to the back side. Grab your pressing cloth, well, most people probably are just pressing on some kind of pressing board, but we're using cloth to mimic that. Fold under the bottom of the moon, okay? Fold it under. Grab your iron and press that under. I don't quite have the access I need here with the camera tripod, but just press it under. Again, steam to soften it up, heat to do the final work. All right, and then clapper. And we should end up with a clean edge that we've rolled under for the point where your hand is going to snag all the time on the pocket flap. So you can see it there, right? It's been folded under. And from the front side, you can see it's nice and clean. Okay. Now, you can leave the top moon here, or you can cut it straight. Doesn't really matter, truth be told. Okay, let's get our little pressing cloth out of the way, and let's get our little baby pocket bag in. So this is our little pocket bag. Again, I kind of eyeballed it. I don't really even know if the measurements are going to work, but it should be big enough to work. So the first thing is first. Okay, so the edge that we attached the bottom of the moon first of the pocket bag. So we need to roll under the linen, and we need to make sure we're rolling it under the direction that's going to sit against the coat body, not roll it under the direction where it would be inside the pocket bag where your hand would go, because that would be silly. So you just take this over to your iron, right? Go ahead, fold it under a certain amount. It's usually like 1/2 inch or something at full scale. Just press it under like so. Okay. And we'll bring our pocket back over. So you can see I have it, the clean edge is up because that's inside the pocket bag. And then we need to find roughly center on this moon. Okay. You can measure this out in real life, but we're just going to find roughly center. We're going to pin it in, and then we're going to start pinning our way up the side all the way till we get up to the flank of that moon. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, You cut the bag straight. What you're putting it into is round. Why not cut the bag round? And you could. It's a good thought to have. And it's something you could do. And it would make a little bit of a cleaner pocket bag. But I don't do that. Because one, ironing it into shape when we're done seems to do well enough. And drawing around and cutting it just takes time. And it's not worth wasting the time. And you may think to yourself now, like, well, bro, that don't sound like an awful lot of time. Sounds like you're maybe just being a little bit lazy. And that might be true to a point. But anywhere you can save time while making a garment, you should. Anywhere that you can save time, let's say that again, right? So there's a lot of other things that we do, a lot of basting work and a lot of things of that nature that we don't want to take the lazy way out. But something like this, it's just not that deep. So we're going to do a whip stitch across the top of the pocket and the pocket bag. So that's what you'll see me doing while I'm talking here. So saving time. Saving time may not matter that much if you're making one garment here and there. Saving time matters an awful lot when you're making a lot of garments all the time. Now, I wouldn't say I make a lot of garments all the time because I don't have time to make a lot of garments all the time. So the garments that I do make, they take a lot of time. And unfortunately, my customers end up waiting a considerable amount of time to get them. I wait an even longer amount of time to get anything I need because I'm making stuff for other people oftentimes. But if you were somebody in this trade in the 18th century, you would be making a lot of garments all the time. Maybe not you personally, you may end up unemployed quite a bit. That's why a lot of these people end up in the army. But your shop, right, where you would be employed, would be making a lot of garments all the time. So anywhere that you can save a little bit of time, well, that adds up. And that adding up translates into more garments being made over time, which translates into more money being earned. And more money being earned is the whole point of this industry, right? It's the whole point of every industry. I doubt very much you would find an awful lot of people working in these shops in the 18th century that are there just because they have a burning passion for the craft and the trade and the traditionalism and all the stuff that you hear about tailoring today, right? You probably have a lot of people who are there for, various reasons and maybe a lot unknown, but it's just a craft. It's a trade. It's no different than being a plumber today or carpenter. Yeah, there are some people, I assume, that have a burning desire, burning passion for plumbing work. Those people most certainly exist. Oh, cool, the thread broke. But most people get into a trade just because it was available for them to get into, and it provides a lifestyle that they're comfortable with living or they find desirable, depending on the trade, right? So I would think no different of a quote-unquote tailor in the 18th century. I'm sure there were some people who were quite passionate about garment making, but I would imagine the vast majority of the people who are involved in this trade are not those people. It's just a job. And in a world where you're getting paid by what you get done, not by being there, anywhere you can cut a corner that doesn't have a disastrous result, well, that would be something you would do, isn't it? So we should strive to recreate that. Now I'm going to knot this off here, and I would not normally knot this off here. Normally I would carry on with the next step I'm going to show you, but because the thread just broke on me while we were working, I have to rethread. So no big deal. Slight intermission here while we reload the needle, and I'll show you what happens now. But just know, normally, as long as my thread's long enough, I do all this on the same thread, and I just carry through. Thread preparation for sewing, I probably don't have to tell you guys anymore. But make sure you're waxing it before you sew with it. Linen thread, silk thread, cotton thread, modern poly thread, doesn't really matter what you're using. Wax it up first, makes it easier to use. All right, so now we got another knot going. Here we go. All right, so we got all our whip stitching done along the top here, right? So when we open up our pocket flap, you can see it in there. All right, so that attaches the pocket back to the top of our flap. It doesn't necessarily add a lot of strength. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run a running stitch along the bottom of this pocket bag. We're going to use our thumb and finger to feel where that little bit of fabric is that we folded under to make this shape. And we're going to stitch just underneath that. Okay. And here we go. Little running stitch. Now what this is going to do is when you actually put things into your pocket, this is going to take the load of that weight on the front half of the pocket here. Not that whip stitching you did at the top. That whip stitching at the top isn't really going to be able to handle much weight, and it would just deform the top curve of your pocket almost instantly with really any amount of weight put in. So we do this here. And I just grab my little pin thing, the thread, and that's the noise you just heard. We just launched the pin holder across the table. That's exciting. And again, you can take more time with this when you're doing it, you know, sort of full speed and in real life. Make sure that as least amount of this thread is showing on either side as possible, because again, the less the thread shows, the less it's actually exposed to the environment. And something like pockets where you're putting stuff in and out of it all the time, and your hands, which are covered in oils, that's ideal. I am not going to waste a lot of time doing that right now. But there you go. You can see a little running stitch underneath. And on the front, when you flip the pocket flap up, it should look something like that, right? And then if you tug on it, you can see it's right here that takes that tug, as opposed to these stitches. All right, so let's go ahead and let's give that a little bit of a press. And you can see when we laid this flat, right, this pocket flap, once the bag itself is kind of doing some weird stuff, right? So we want to go ahead and get a little bit of shape in here. So again, steam softens fabric, softens the fibers. And then we'll use, once we got it malleable, then we'll use heat and pressure to change those fibers permanently. And clapper. Okay. So you see how that worked? And if we leave this to dry, we may have to do this a few times, but if we leave it to dry, we're not going to do it a few times because we're trying to save time with this, right? But if you really, really, really wanted this to be nice, you could do that a few times and you would really get that shape to be in there permanently. But you can see it took on the shape. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, okay, it's cool, bro. You get yourself a nice iron. It blasts a lot of steam out of there. But how do I do this if I have an iron, let's say it doesn't have steam, or I'm doing this the old-fashioned way with like a plate iron, right? An iron, like what is the word for those older irons? I can't think of it right now. But anyway, the old irons, right? An 18th century style iron that you like heat up in the fire, or you put the hot bit of iron inside of it. It's actually pretty simple. Normally when you're pressing wool with something like that, you get a piece of linen as a press cloth, and you actually dampen the linen. And then when you put the hot iron on it, it makes steam. Something like this, because it is linen, you could just go ahead and wet this directly. Not sopping wet, just get it kind of damp. When you put the iron on it, it will make its own steam. It's a technique that's still used a lot today, as a matter of fact, and I use it for all kinds of things, like setting pleats, for example. That's the technique that I use. I don't use the old steam iron here. I actually use an old heavy flat iron that doesn't have steam. All right, so there we go. This is dried a little bit, so it should be more or less permanently set into shape. All right, now bottom of the pocket bag. We're going to go ahead and fold it under like so. Again, away from where the hands will be, although it doesn't really necessarily matter in this case because it's going to be inside. But we're going to bring it up, and we want it to come up just beneath the stitching for, can you see the stitching up here for the pocket flap? We want it to come just beneath that, okay? And along the flanks, make sure it's more or less lined up with the side. Good, give it a press once you get it in shape. Makes it easy to work with. We want it to come up here, okay? And then we're gonna, you could base this, and I would base this probably in real life, but for the sake of right now, we're just gonna throw some pins in here to hold it in shape, okay? So that it's where we want it to be. Yeah, put it here. All right. Now, we are going to whip stitch across the top edge, okay? You could do a running stitch here as well, it doesn't really matter. We don't necessarily want to go through the front of the fabric until we get to the pocket bag may be wider than the flap, right? So not until we get onto the flap do we want it to go to the front edge. Now when we do get to the pocket flap, we actually want to catch the lining of the pocket flap. Now we don't have a lining in what we're doing here, right? But when you're doing this whip stitch, you want to go through the coat body, catch the lining of the pocket flap, not go through the pocket flap, and then come back through and make your whip stitch. And I don't know, because we don't have a lining, I don't really know if I'm just catching some of this pocket bag or not, but hopefully I'm going to do it at least in a few places so you can see why we want that done. We folded over the top of the pocket bag here, by the way, just so there's a little bit more bite for the needle. It's really a construction thing. It's not essential. You don't have to do this, but when you have 2 layers to sew through rather than 1, things tend to just kind of hold up better. So there we go. Dirty, ugly whip stitch across the top, right? And then when we get back over here where we're away from pocket flap, just make sure we're not sewing all the way through again. And that's it, knot it off. Now hopefully I've caught enough of the pocket where I can show you why you want to catch the lining. Okay. So we caught 1 or 2 stitches in here. But anyway, when there's a lining in here, when you do this whip stitch, if you catch it, it's what helps keep the pocket flap wanting to come to flap down, for 1, and 2, keep your top edge from rolling around. Okay. Now, we have one more thing to do, right? If you look on the inside here, we have this little flap. Like I said, you could keep it like this. You could cut it straight across. Doesn't really matter. But we need to anchor it down to something. So again, we're going to do this from the back side. And you could probably even take a piece of chalk if you wanted to. Where's my blue chalk? There's my blue chalk. And you can feel with your finger where that sort of half moon is. And you could come along here, and I'm going to do the chalk just so you can see where it is. You can do this with your fingers pretty well too, but there's a half moon. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a whip stitch from the back side. But what it's going to do is catch the front edge of this so it gets finished. But again, if we had a lining in the pocket flap, we also want to catch the lining. So that the lining of this gets attached to this, and this gets attached to the pocket bag. And this is why your pocket flap doesn't want to open. You don't need buttons to keep it closed. It'll keep itself closed. So we'll see how this comes out. But here we go. So we're holding the flap down and everything, right? Because again, we want to catch the lining of that pocket bag if we could, right? We want to catch the flap. We want to catch the lining. So I may just take too much up here just so that we get the effect, because we don't have a lining. But again, you would just catch the lining. You would not catch the outside of the pocket flap, right? We don't want to see the stitching on the pocket flap. So you just do this, right? This whip stitch along like so. Okay. And there we go. We're at the end, knotted off. So there you can see we've done all these and what it's done on the front. So I did catch it through. Again, this you would not do this. You would not catch through the flap. You would just catch the lining. But since we don't have a lining, I wanted to show you the effect, right? So this way you open up the flap and never mind. You don't get the freedom of play when you don't have a lining. So let's just go ahead and cut it out. But anyway, so well, that didn't work out. So let's try again. You need it to be a lining. You don't get the freedom of play when it's not a lining. But we'll just do a few stitches so you get the idea. Don't try to cheat things, folks. This is what happens. All right, so we do a few of the stitches from the back, and you can see they catch through here. You could do it from this side also, right? I'm gonna cut this free here. You could do it from the front side also, right? Like so. You just stitch along here. You want this to be anchored, right? And thread broke again. Cool. There you can see it, right? Because you want this to be anchored, but you want the flap to be anchored to this thing as well. And when it's a lining, you still get enough freedom to play. So what do I do when I do this? I do cut the top of the moon off. I cut it straight across because it allows the flap to open up more. You don't have to catch it through to the lining, but that's what I do. All right, anyway. Well, now our thread broke. We're going to have to rethread. So the last thing that we have to do here is just close the pocket bag itself up, right? And that's it. So let's go ahead and bang that out real quick. All right, closing the pocket bag. I'm going to do one side. I'm not going to do both sides because there's no reason to do things twice for no reason. So all you do is a running stitch to close the bag up. So You got to find out where the flank of it is, which is over here, right? And then just stitch up to it. And you just do kind of a quick and dirty running stitch. It doesn't really matter. All the way up. And that's it. Pocket bag closed. So we turn, you can see it there in the stitching, just quick dirty running stitch. And if you open it up, you got pocket bag over there. So we're going to revisit this top thing here because I'm not going to leave you with an incomplete video. So I'm just going to show you exactly what it is I do. Again, minus the lining and the pocket flap. Okay, so what I do here is on this straight bit, I cut that. I cut that right off. Okay, so get these stitches out of here. I just cut it right off, a bit straight, right across the top. I'll mark this in real life. I won't just eyeball it, but good enough for the video. So you see that? Cut it straight off, straight across the top. All right, let's go clean this up a little bit. Like so. Make a big happy face, right? All right, so let's try this again. The catchy stitch. Again, I promise you, this is a whole lot easier when you have a lining in the pocket flap. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't realize how essential it was actually going to be for this video. But, so we feel along here, like where is that, that opening, right? And we can feel it, and then we'll chalk it, okay? Now, I don't really chalk this when I do this, but we'll chalk it so you can see where it is now, okay? And the goal here is to catch the pocket bag, right? The goal here is to catch the pocket bag, come up through this thing, over that, and then catch the lining, right? So this all gets attached together. That's the goal. Very difficult to do without there actually being a lining in here. So we'll see what we end up with. You don't generally need too many of these stitches. They don't have to be super fine or anything. So you can see we're doing that whip stitch there, and you can see what it's doing on the front, right? It's catching all that stuff together. Now again, you do not want to see this stitching through the front. You want to see, it would be into the lining of the pocket bag, not all the way through. But you can see it wants to keep that closed, the flap closed, and then the top is sort of cleanly stitched, right? As opposed to this side where you can still get your finger up under there. So I'm not going to continue all the way across because that's just wasting your time. I think you get the idea here, right? So that's a way you can do that. The other way, like I told you, is you can do it. You could do it from the front. You could fold this thing back and do it along there. I find it easier when you cut it across the top to do this. We tried to show you the other way. It didn't work out. at least not at small scale. But you do see it, so it's a thing people do. So like, what's the last thing to do here, really? I mean, give it a press, right? You gotta give it a press, and you're all done. Now, oftentimes, what you see on the corner of each pocket is some little stitching. It just anchors the flap down. You see it done in a couple different ways. Sometimes you see that this stuff is done sort of at an angle like that. Sometimes you see it's just a little bit of a stitching like so. Sometimes it's a stitching there and a stitching up. All it is a little bit of a prick stitch. Okay, so you take your pocket flap and it's just a little prick stitch that holds it all steady. And again, it's just to help prevent the flap from opening up too much. That's all that it is. Okay, and it's just a few stitches. It's not many. It's usually about a 1/2 inch of stitching or something to that effect. Okay. Something like that, right? You've probably seen that before. Just a few stitches and that's it. And that just stops the corner from picking up. And that's it, folks. That's 3 different ways to put a flapped pocket onto a coat, and a rather rough example of putting in a pocket bag. When we do some construction stuff, we'll dive more into pocket bagging. And there's a couple different ways to pocket bag. Depends on the kind of pocket you're doing, whether you are or are not lining a garment, whatever. So we'll have a more in-depth thing on that. So, and we'll make sure we have all the actual requisite pieces, you know, in this example, a lining in this. Today, focus was just the flaps. So I hope that helps you understanding how to put coat flaps on. As usual, if you have any questions, go ahead, just shoot them down in the comments or shoot me a message, send me an email, however it is you prefer to communicate. And, you know, I will answer you eventually and at some point. Until the next video, folks, I hope that you will remain well, and I'll see you then.